Under the soft breath of dawn, the sea was a living mirror, its surface rippling like the skin of a sleeping goddess, silvered by the shy light of morning. The air carried a music that did not belong to any human hand. It was the sound of strings half heard, of waves whispering secrets to shells, of something sacred trembling in the heart of the tide. On such mornings, the fishermen of Enoshima would pause their nets, holding their breath as if the ocean itself were about to speak. They called it Benten's song. None could describe it the same way. Some said it was the voice of the sea. Others swore it was a woman's melody, soft and yearning, floating between the mist and the horizon. Long before temples crowned the cliffs, before prayers were carved into wood and stone, Benten was already there, woven into the rhythm of the waves. She was the goddess of beauty and art, of all things that move with grace and sound with feeling. Her domain was not the sea itself, but the pulse within it, the eternal heartbeat of creation. To some she appeared as a maiden clothed in flowing silks that shimmered like sunlight over water. To others she was nothing but sound, a gentle note that stirred the spirit, awakening dreams and desires too delicate to name. Legends said she rose from the deep in an age when the world was still half asleep, when the first poems were whispered by rivers and mountains still remembered the gods who shaped them. From her lips came the first song, a melody that lured storms into calm, hearts into longing, and silence into art. It was through Benten that humankind learned to translate feeling into motion, sorrow into verse, and love into the trembling of strings. She was not a goddess of possession, but of flow. Everything that passed through her, sound, water, emotion, was transformed, never trapped. Her gift was not permanence, but renewal. Artists, lovers, and dreamers prayed to her not for reward, but for inspiration, for that moment when life itself seems to hum with hidden music. Yet, even as she blessed them, she remained distant, her essence scattered across every note of the world's endless song. When the winds were still, one could sense her presence in the smallest movements, the flutter of a sleeve, the reflection of moonlight trembling on the shore, the way a sigh might linger between two lovers before words broke the silence. To invoke her was to surrender, to beauty, to impermanence, to the ache of creation itself. She was both muse and mystery, the sweetness in sorrow, the longing that makes art inevitable. They say her first temple was not built by hands, but formed when the sea withdrew one morning, revealing a small island bathed in gold light. The fishermen approached with reverence, and in the air they felt something, a warmth that hummed beneath their skin, like the touch of music made flesh. On the sand lay a single shell, spiraled and pale as a breath. From within it came a faint tone, a sound that could not be ignored. They carried it home, and when the wind passed through its hollow, it sang. That was how her name was first spoken. Benten, the voice within all things that live. From that day on, her song became part of the island's heartbeat. When storms raged, the people sang to her, and the waves grew gentle as if soothed by her unseen hand. When lovers parted, they whispered her name over the water, believing the tide would carry their sorrow to her to be transformed into something beautiful. And when children were born, mothers bathed them in seawater while murmuring prayers to the goddess who ruled over sound and soul alike. But Benton's beauty was not the quiet perfection of statues or jewels. It was alive, shifting, unpredictable as the sea. Her laughter was said to cause the wind to dance. Her tears, when they fell into the waves, became pearls. Some nights, when the moon hung low and the world was silent, she would rise from the water to walk the shore, her steps leaving trails of shimmering foam. Those who glimpsed her spoke of the overwhelming tenderness in her gaze, an expression that could undo a heart without a word. She was both near and unreachable, a being of eternal movement. The mortals who loved her could never hold her. They could only listen, and in listening, lose themselves. Yet it was said that this surrender was sacred, that through longing for her, people came to understand the beauty of impermanence. To love Benton was to love the fleeting moment, the shimmer before disappearance, the note that fades even as it moves you to tears. Her temples, once simple shrines of driftwood and shells, began to echo with the sound of lutes and flutes. Musicians offered their best melodies to her, believing that if she was pleased, she would return the gift with inspiration beyond mortal reach. Even painters would sit by the water's edge, trying to capture the way light bends upon the waves, whispering prayers under their breath. Even warriors, hardened by steel and blood, sought her blessing before battle, hoping her song might steady their hands and grant them grace in the chaos of fate. But Benton's song was not only heard by those who prayed, it called to anyone who felt too deeply, who had ever been broken open by beauty or loss. Her melody was made of the things humans feared to feel, the sweetness of sorrow, the serenity of surrender, the ache that lies within joy. It taught that emotion itself was divine, that to feel was to live, and to live was to create. In the stories passed down by priests and poets, her voice was said to rise whenever the world grew too loud, reminding humankind of the stillness that exists within motion. It could be heard in the lull between waves, in the rustle of reeds, in the trembling silence before a confession. Her presence was not bound to form, but to resonance. She existed wherever something stirred the heart. It was in this resonance that her divinity shone most clearly. Benton did not demand worship through fear or duty. Her altar was emotion itself. To weep was to honor her. To sing, to paint, to love without expectation, all were acts of prayer. She was the goddess who asked nothing but feeling, who welcomed both ecstasy and pain as part of the same sacred rhythm. And so her followers learned that the divine was not distant, but pulsing within them, as close as breath, as deep as the sea. Through ages of change, her name endured like an echo through water. Even as the world turned toward silence and reason, there were always those who heard her faint melody beneath the surface of things. Musicians spoke of sudden inspiration that felt not their own. Lovers, upon parting, would feel a gentle calm, as though someone unseen had placed their hand upon their hearts. The sea remained her eternal mirror, reflecting her moods, tranquil when she smiled, furious when she wept. Some say her song can still be heard at dusk, when the tide slips between day and night, when the air is heavy with salt and longing. It is in that fragile hour that her essence lingers most strongly, the union of beauty and sadness, of love and distance. Her voice, though faint, calls to those who are willing to listen deeply enough. To hear it is to remember that every heart is made of tides, that within us all something divine stirs, waiting to be sung. And so, Benten's myth is not merely a story of a goddess, but a remembrance of what it means to be alive. Her song continues, carried by the sea, by the voices of those who dared to create, to feel, to surrender. She is the breath between sound and silence, the shimmer on the water before dawn, the tender ache that gives life its beauty. To speak her name is to call upon the endless dance between emotion and art, between mortal and divine. Listen closely, and you might hear it even now, the soft rhythm that binds the heart to the sea. It is not merely music, but memory, desire, and devotion intertwined. It is Benten's song, eternal and ephemeral, forever returning with each wave that kisses the shore. At the edge of the island, where the sea met the stone, lived a young musician named Haru. His hands were slender, his eyes quiet and dark, as if they had absorbed too much of the ocean's secrets. Each evening he sat upon a rock smoothed by years of tides and played his biwa beneath the slow descent of the sun. The villagers said he was touched by Benten, that his music carried the faint echo of her divine melody. Yet Haru himself never claimed such a gift. He only said that when he played, he felt something move through him, something not entirely his own, like a breath drawn from the depths of the sea. He had first heard her song as a child, during a storm that tore across the coast. While others hid in their homes, he had wandered to the shore, drawn by a sound that rose between thunder and waves. It was not human. No voice could hold such purity and ache at once. The melody filled him, trembling through his bones, until the fear dissolved into wonder. And in that instant, he saw her, a silhouette of light upon a wave, the curve of lips forming a note, the fall of hair that shone like night water. When the storm passed, the vision faded, yet her song remained, circling within him like a tide that would never rest. Years passed, but Haru still played to her. He did not know if she listened, yet each note was a prayer disguised as music, a confession of longing no words could contain. Sometimes, as he played, the sea grew still, and the wind seemed to pause, as though the world itself leaned closer to hear. In those moments, his heart trembled with both reverence and ache, for he felt her presence, soft, distant, unbearably near. Benten, goddess of sound and beauty, watched him from beneath the veils of waves. She seldom appeared in mortal form, but Haru's devotion stirred something within her, a curiosity born of tenderness. Centuries had passed since she had felt drawn toward a human soul. Most mortals prayed for gifts, talent, love, fortune, but Haru prayed through creation itself. His devotion was not one of words, but of feeling. His music alive with surrender and quiet hunger. It called to her. On nights when the moon floated like a pearl above the horizon, Benten would rise from the sea in silence, her body woven from mist and melody. She watched him unseen, her presence brushing against his skin like a whisper. To her, he was fragile and luminous, a being of limitation, yet filled with a depth even gods envied. She felt the ache of mortality in him, that exquisite awareness of time, of impermanence, of beauty that must fade. There was something intoxicating in that fragility. To feel so deeply, knowing the world would end, was a kind of courage the divine could never possess. Benten could not age, could not lose. Her eternity was both blessing and prison. But Haru's every note carried the pulse of life, urgent, fleeting, full of yearning. She envied him that ache, that ability to love the moment even as it dissolved. Sometimes she would move closer, her reflection flickering across the water. Haru would feel it, the sudden change in the air, the faint perfume of salt and lotus. His fingers trembled on the strings, unsure if the chill that rose within him was fear or desire. Then, through the veil of mist, she would appear. She never came the same way twice. Sometimes she rose as a shimmer of light that took the shape of a woman, her form outlined in silver. Other nights she emerged fully, barefoot, robed in white and blue, her eyes deep as the ocean floor. When she spoke, her voice was soft, as though each word were sung rather than said. "Your music reaches me," she murmured, gazing at the biwa in his lap. "It moves through the water like light. Why do you play?" Haru could not lift his eyes. The air between them trembled, alive with something he did not understand. "Because I can't stop," he whispered. "Because the silence after feels like drowning." Her lips curved in the smile, both tender and sorrowful. "Then you are already one of mine." Each time she came, their silence grew heavier with unspoken feeling. There was reverence in it, but also something more dangerous, a hunger neither dared to name. Haru's dreams filled with her image, her hair unbound, her body dissolving into waves that seemed to reach for him, her song slipping between his breaths. He awoke each dawn with his heart racing, his hands trembling with the need to play again, as though music were the only bridge between them. For Benten, the attraction was perilous. She was drawn to his imperfection, to the trembling uncertainty of his emotions. When she watched him, she felt the impossible pull of what she could never have, a mortal's warmth, his fleeting spark, his fear of death that made each heartbeat sacred. Yet she knew that to touch him as a god touches would unmake him. Still, she lingered. There were nights when she hovered close enough that her breath mingled with his. Her fingers hovered over his as he played, guiding them without touch. The notes that followed shimmered with something neither human nor divine, a sound like desire learning how to breathe. Each melody was an act of yearning, a reaching across the endless divide between heaven and earth. The villagers began to notice changes in him. His eyes carried light even in shadow, his voice softer, his manner distant, as if he lived partly elsewhere. They whispered he had fallen under a goddess's spell. Some pitied him, others envied him, but Haru paid no mind. His world had narrowed to the stretch of sand where she appeared, to the music that kept her near.
Benten, too, grew restless. Her temples echoed with prayers, yet none stirred her heart like Haru's devotion. She began to visit him more often, though always in secret. Each encounter deepened the thread between them, delicate yet unbreakable. She told herself she came to bless his art, but she knew the truth. She was drawn to his longing, the way his soul trembled when her name touched his lips. Once, as dawn began to color the sea, she stood beside him and asked softly, "If I were not what I am, would you still play?" He looked at her then, really looked, at the light trembling on her skin, the sorrow hidden behind her beauty. "If you were not what you are," he said, "there would be no song left in the world." The goddess turned away, her eyes glistening with something dangerously human. She had been adored by countless souls, but none had spoken to her with such simplicity. In that fragile moment, she felt the weight of eternity pressing against the warmth of his presence. For the first time in ages, she longed not to be a goddess, but a woman, mortal, fragile, capable of being held. The sea sighed at her feet as though sharing her sorrow. She knew this desire was the seed of chaos. No divine being could love without consequence. Yet she could not turn away. His music had awakened something buried within her, a desire to feel, to be seen not as myth, but as a being capable of longing. As days turned to nights and nights into seasons, their meetings became both solace and torment. The world between them shimmered with unspoken promises, with the ache of closeness never meant to be complete. Haru's melodies grew more beautiful, more aching, as if each note carried a secret farewell he dared not speak. And Benten listened, even when unseen. Her divinity trembled with contradiction, love and restraint, eternity and transience entwined. In him she found the reflection of all she had given humankind, the courage to feel, to create, to ache for something greater than oneself. And though she knew their bond could not endure the laws that bound their worlds, she also knew this: through him her song would live, not as worship, but as love made eternal through art. And so the goddess and the mortal continued to meet in the hush between tides, their souls singing to one another across the fragile veil of existence, bound by music, longing, and the impossible beauty of what could never truly be.
The nights grew heavier with longing. The space between Benten and Haru, once sacred and still, now throbbed with something that neither music nor silence could contain. Each time she emerged from the sea, her form seemed more tangible, her gaze more human. The distance between them, a veil once shimmering with reverence, had begun to tremble under the weight of desire. What had begun as worship had become something else, something perilous. Haru's fingers no longer played for devotion, but for hunger. Each note he drew from his biwa was a confession, every vibration a plea that reached beyond prayer. The goddess listened, her heart aching with both pride and dread. His music was no longer an offering, it was a call, a summoning of her very essence. The sea obeyed it, waves rising and falling with the rhythm of his yearning. When she came to him now, she did not arrive as mist or moonlight. She stepped onto the sand as a woman, breath, warmth, pulse. The wind seemed to hush in her presence. Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no divinity between them, only the shared tremor of need. "Why do you look at me like that?" she whispered one night, her voice fragile as foam. "Because," he said, his breath shaking, "you are the only thing I have ever seen that makes the world disappear." Benten closed her eyes. The words, though simple, struck her deeper than any hymn. No mortal had ever spoken to her without awe or fear. Haru spoke as if she were not a goddess, but a woman made of flesh and ache. And in that truth, she felt herself unraveling. Each encounter blurred the boundaries further. When his hand brushed hers, the ocean stirred. When she smiled, the stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with their hearts. The divine world began to take notice. The waters whispered to the winds, and the winds carried the story to the heavens. Gods who once sang in harmony with Benten's melody now listened with disquiet. The goddess of art, the one who taught humankind to channel passion into beauty, was herself becoming bound by it. But desire, once awakened, does not retreat. It only deepens, pulling all things toward its center. Benten felt it like a tide rising within her, a force too ancient to resist. She found herself dreaming of him even in the quiet of her realm. His voice haunted her sleep, his songs rippling through the still waters of eternity. She began to descend to the mortal world more often, unable to remain away. Each time her body grew heavier, her divinity dimmer, her heartbeat more human.
Haru noticed. He saw how her light seemed softer, how her eyes lingered longer on him. "You're fading," he murmured one evening, tracing the edge of her shadow on the sand. "Perhaps it is not fading, but becoming." The words chilled him and warmed him all at once. Becoming what? She turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sea burned gold beneath the dying sun. "Like you." Her confession was both a gift and a curse. The gods could not remain among mortals without cost. To take form fully was to surrender eternity, to bind oneself to time, to pain, to death. Yet the more she loved him, the more the divine weight within her felt like a burden. She wanted to feel, not only inspire feeling. The sky darkened, the tide rolled higher, and desire began to twist into defiance. For the first time, Benten's song changed. It was no longer serene. It quivered with passion, with the ache of choice. The heavens trembled at its sound. That night, as she stood before him beneath a trembling moon, Haru reached out. His fingertips brushed the curve of her neck, a touch so light it could have been imagined. But the goddess shivered. The air thickened around them. "Do you know what you're doing?" she whispered. "No," he breathed. "But I've already done it." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, divinity faltered. Her breath mingled with his. The sea rose around them in waves that glowed faintly, as if the ocean itself had become their witness. Benten should have vanished then, dissolved into mist before the forbidden could unfold. But she did not. She stayed. Her lips parted, trembling with everything she had denied for centuries. "Mortals burn," she said softly. "Their love consumes them. It ends in ash." "Then let me burn," Haru answered. "If you are the fire, let me burn for you." The words broke something in her, a barrier older than memory. She closed the space between them. Her hand found his cheek. The moment her skin met his, the air shuddered, the sea flared white, and the world seemed to hold its breath. For a heartbeat, the divine and the mortal became one. But passion in a goddess is never quiet. The ocean churned as though it too had fallen into ecstasy. The waves roared and crashed, swallowing the shore in light. Haru felt the weight of eternity pouring into him, his body trembling, his soul igniting with something too vast for human flesh. Benten pulled back, her face stricken, her breath ragged with both wonder and fear. "No," she whispered, "you cannot hold me. I'll destroy you." "You already have," he said, smiling faintly, "and I don't mind." Her tears fell into the sea, turning to pearls as they touched the water. "You don't understand what this means," she said. "To love a goddess is to lose everything. To love a mortal is to fall." "Then fall," he whispered, his voice trembling like a final note. "Fall with me." For the first time in her existence, Benten hesitated, not out of wisdom, but out of longing. The heavens seemed to darken with the weight of her choice. She felt the pull of both worlds, the eternity behind her, the fragile warmth before her. The sea roared her name. The gods whispered warnings that echoed like thunder. But her heart had already chosen. When she kissed him, the sky bled gold. Every wave froze mid-motion. Every star flickered as if uncertain whether to shine or die. The world seemed to tilt toward them, drawn by the gravity of something both forbidden and sacred. For one perfect instant, their souls intertwined, divinity and mortality fused in the language of touch. Then the world exhaled, the sea collapsed back into motion, the light dissolved. Benten staggered, her divine radiance flickering. Haru caught her in his arms, his heart pounding with awe and terror. She looked up at him with eyes full of both love and regret. "It's begun," she said softly. "The sea will not forgive me. The heavens will not forget you." He held her tighter. "Then let them remember." A distant rumble echoed across the horizon, a storm forming where the sky met the deep. The gods were stirring. The order that bound creation had been disturbed. Benten, goddess of the tide, had done what none of her kind dared. She had allowed herself to desire. And, though the sea still shimmered beneath the moon, something in it had changed. Its music was no longer pure. It carried warmth, sorrow, and the echo of a forbidden heartbeat. The song of the goddess had found its answer in a mortal's touch, and the heavens, once silent, now listened in grief and wonder. For love had entered the divine, and nothing, not even eternity, would remain untouched. The night had no beginning, no end. The sea stretched like a living pulse beneath the moon, every wave trembling as if aware of what was about to unfold. The world seemed suspended between breath and silence. And in that fragile stillness, Benten stood before Haru, half goddess, half woman, all yearning. Her skin shimmered faintly as if made of moonlight that had learned to breathe. He looked at her, trembling, unable to separate reverence from desire. The air was heavy with salt and the faint scent of lotus. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the unbearable need to reach out, to touch what he could not keep, to love what he could never truly possess. "Benten," he whispered, her name breaking like a prayer. She closed the distance between them, her voice barely a ripple in the air. "Do not speak my name. Names hold power, and I have already given you too much of mine." Her words should have been a warning, but they felt like an invitation. He raised a hand, hesitant, tracing the outline of her face with the kind of reverence one reserves for sacred things. The moment his skin brushed hers, the world fractured into music. The sea began to sing. It was not the sound of water or wind, but of something older, an unspoken rhythm that had always existed beneath creation. The waves moved like the breath of a sleeping god. The air shimmered with color, and every sound dissolved into the pulse of their joined hearts. Benten's eyes glowed with soft golden sorrow. "This is what mortals call love," she murmured. "You feel it as bliss, but it is also ruin." "Then let me be ruined. If ruin has your face, I welcome it." Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh.
You speak like a poet on the edge of madness. Perhaps that's what your music does, he said. It makes mortals mad for beauty. For a heartbeat, she was still. Then her hands slid down to his chest, feeling the fragile thrum of his life beneath her palms. And what if beauty wishes to be mad for you? The sea rose higher around them, luminous and alive, encircling them like a living temple. Every droplet shimmered with light, every current pulsed to the rhythm of their breath. She leaned closer, and the world itself seemed to hold still.
When their lips met, the ocean erupted. It was not a kiss of flesh, but of existence. The divine and mortal realms collided in an explosion of sensation. Every note Haru had ever played, every melody she had ever inspired, burst into color and sound that rippled through the night. Stars flickered brighter, their light bending as though listening to the music of their union. Her body was warmth and tide, silk and lightning. His touch, trembling and human, grounded her infinity into something real. She tasted like the ocean's edge, salt and sweetness, eternity condensed into a single breath. The sea, responding to its goddess, lifted them as if in worship. Waves became wings, foam became flame, and the night became a canvas of sound and motion. In that moment, they were not goddess and mortal. They were music itself. Their breaths were chords, their heartbeats percussion. Each motion, each sigh, built upon the last until the rhythm consumed them. Benten's hair spilled around them like dark water, her eyes glowing brighter than the stars. "Do you hear it?" she whispered against his skin. "What?" "The song that was never meant to be sung." He nodded, unable to speak. It flowed through them, her divine melody joined with his mortal rhythm, creating something the world had never known, imperfect, fragile, yet endlessly beautiful. Her divinity trembled. She felt herself dissolving, not into mist or wave, but into feeling, pure and unbound. The barriers of eternity cracked, and for the first time in her existence, she felt wholly alive. She gasped, the sound both pain and pleasure, as if creation itself had entered her. The light around them grew unbearable. The ocean burned white. The air shimmered with sound. In their union, the sea mirrored the sky, and the stars seemed to dip closer, drawn into their orbit. Haru's fingers traced her spine, and where he touched, light followed. "I can feel you," he whispered, "not like before, not as worship, but as truth." Her response came like a sigh, half ecstasy, half despair. "And I feel you, so fragile, so infinite in your briefness." Their bodies moved like music, each motion flowing into the next, each touch building toward something vast and unspeakable. There was no separation, only rhythm, only breath. The sea rocked them as if to cradle the impossible union it had birthed.
And then
As the night reached its highest note, Benten cried out, not in sorrow nor joy, but in release. Her voice became the ocean's roar, a song of breaking and becoming. The waves surged outward, carrying the echo of that sound to every shore. Fishermen awoke to the sea glowing like liquid starlight. Birds fled into the sky, and for one eternal instant, the world felt the heartbeat of the goddess. Haru clung to her, as though holding the very edge of creation. Her light flared brighter, then dimmed. The music began to fade, replaced by silence so deep it seemed sacred. "Do you hear it?" she whispered once more, her lips trembling against his. "The silence?" "Yes, it's the end of the song." He looked at her, panic flickering in his gaze. "No! Don't leave me!" Her eyes were pools of gold and sorrow. "I cannot stay. The sea calls me back. If I remain, the tides will die. The music will end for all." "But it just began for me." She touched his cheek, her fingers warm, then cooling. "Then remember it. Let it live through you. Every song you play will be me. Every note will carry this night." He shook his head, tears mixing with the salt spray. "I'd trade every song for one more breath of you." She smiled, faint and tender. "Then you've already learned what it means to love the divine." As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, her body began to dissolve, skin turning to mist, hair to waves, voice to music. The sea drew her back, slowly, lovingly, as if reluctant to reclaim what it had lent. Haru reached out, his fingers closing around nothing but the air she left behind. The sound of her song lingered for a moment longer, a faint hum inside his chest, before it too faded. The sea grew calm again. The world exhaled. He stood alone, the sand cold beneath his feet, the dawn gray and soft. The ocean shimmered faintly, and though she was gone, the air still carried the taste of her, salt and sweetness, eternity and loss. And from that day on, when Haru played his biwa, the sea always answered. Its waves rose in rhythm to his melody, as though the goddess herself still listened, still sang through him. For their union had not vanished, it had transformed. Her divinity now lived within his music, and every note carried both their souls. A harmony born from desire, loss, and something beyond both. The song of Benten was no longer the sea's alone. It had become human, flawed, and beautiful. Eternal, not through divinity, but through memory.
The sea was quiet now. Days had passed since the night it sang, and yet its silence was not empty. It was full, resonant, the kind of stillness that hums with everything left unsaid. Haru sat at the edge of the shore, where moonlight touched the waves, his biwa resting across his knees. He had not dared to play since the night of her parting. Every time his fingers hovered above the strings, he felt her there, her breath folded into the breeze, her warmth hidden within the salt-tinged air. The horizon looked different now. It was wider, more infinite, as though the sea itself had learned the shape of longing. For a long time he could not bear the sound of his own voice, nor the feel of music. But one dusk, as the tide slipped softly around his ankles, he let his thumb brush one string. The sound that bloomed was fragile and bright, like the cry of a bird just before dawn. It rippled through the quiet, and the sea stirred in answer. The waves swayed closer, and for a fleeting instant he thought he heard her laughter hidden in the rhythm of the foam. He closed his eyes and began to play. The melody came slowly, trembling with restraint, no longer the fierce song of passion that had once summoned a goddess, but something humbler, a hymn of remembrance. The notes rose and fell like breath, carrying gratitude, sorrow, and the ache of acceptance. The music drifted across the shore, and the water sighed back, its voice neither grief nor joy, but a mingling of both. In that sound, Haru understood. She was not gone. She had simply become the music itself, the current beneath the melody, the unseen pulse within his chest. He had thought he had lost her to the sea, but she had only changed form, just as every tide does. When the wind touched his skin, it carried the scent of lotus and salt, the quiet trace of the divine that had once leaned close enough to kiss him. The villagers soon noticed that the sea near his home had grown strange. Storms broke apart before reaching the shore. Boats that drifted too far out returned safely, carried by unseen currents. Fishermen found pearls washed up after full moons, round, small, glowing faintly as though touched by moonlight itself. They called them Benten's tears, and told stories that the goddess had fallen in love with a mortal musician and left her sorrow in the sea. When children asked who the musician was, their parents would only smile and point to the old man who played by the rocks at sunset. Haru never denied it. He never confirmed it either. Instead, he played, and when he did, the waves leaned closer, like listeners who already knew the ending but wished to feel it again. His music became legend. Travelers came from distant villages to hear it, to sit by the sea and listen as dusk turned to night. Many claimed that when he played, the stars shimmered lower, as though drawn by the melody. Lovers whispered that his songs could make the heart remember what it had lost. Others said the notes carried a kind of prayer that healed those who listened, softly, invisibly. But Haru knew the truth. It was her. Benten's spirit lingered in each vibration, each ripple that touched the sand. Through his mortal hands she continued to sing, and through his fragile body her eternal pulse found shape. Some nights, when the world was utterly still, he felt her presence most vividly. The air would thicken with warmth, the water glow faintly gold. He would lift his gaze and see her reflection shimmering just beneath the surface, eyes luminous, hair moving like waves, never clear enough to reach, but close enough to ache. He would smile and whisper, "You're still here," and the sea would stir as if to nod. He no longer prayed for her return. Love, he had come to understand, was not always meant to remain. Some loves exist to change the shape of the soul, to carve space for something vast and eternal. She had been that love, the tide that broke him open so the music could flow through. And the world bore her imprint. Artists began to dream of melodies that felt like water. Painters spoke of seeing gold in the foam where none existed. Even the gods, high in their distant realms, noticed a new softness in the sea. They whispered among themselves about Benten's transgression, but none could undo what she had created. The ocean now carried a note of human imperfection, and the heavens, despite themselves, found it beautiful. Time, unrelenting yet gentle, moved forward. Haru grew older, his hair silvered like the foam on the waves, his voice deepened into quiet stillness. Yet when he played, something within him remained untouched by years. His fingers moved as though guided by the sea itself, and each chord seemed to open the sky. On the night of his final song, the moon hung low and heavy, painting the world in silver. He felt it before it happened, the quiet pull, the sense of ending. Sitting at the shore, he placed his biwa on his lap and began to play. The melody unfolded slowly, warm and fragile, like memory itself returning home. Every note was her, the laughter that had once filled the shore, the warmth of her breath, the sound of her voice saying, "Remember me." As the last notes rose, the air trembled, the sea shimmered gold, and there she was again, Benten, standing upon the tide as if the water itself had become her throne. Her eyes met his, and in them was no sorrow, only peace. She smiled, soft as dawn, and raised her hand in silent blessing. He did not speak. He simply watched, heart overflowing. She mouthed a single word, "Thank you." And as the final note faded, her image dissolved into the sea's glow.
The next morning, they found him seated where the water met the sand, the biwa still in his lap, his gaze turned toward the horizon. His face was serene, as if he were still listening to something too beautiful to end. They buried him beside the rocks where he had played, and when the wind passed through the reeds, it hummed faintly in a rhythm that none could name. The villagers built a small shrine there, no larger than a fishing hut, adorned with seashells and a single white lotus carved in stone. They called it the Shrine of Benten's Song. Over the years, the melody lived on. Minstrels carried it across the islands, each adding a note, a pause, a breath of their own. It became a song for lovers parted by distance, for sailors lost at sea, for artists chasing beauty. No one remembered its origin clearly, but they all knew how it felt. To hear it was to remember something you had loved deeply and lost beautifully. And still, when the sea is calm and the moon lays its silver road across the water, those who listen closely swear they can hear two melodies entwined. One deep and eternal, the voice of the goddess, the other soft and fleeting, the echo of a mortal heart. Together, they weave the endless rhythm of tide and time, a love that never truly ended, only changed shape. The ocean still glitters beneath the stars, its waves whispering secrets to those patient enough to listen. Somewhere within that sound, her laughter hides, his music breathes, and the world continues to turn to their unseen rhythm. It is said that every song born of longing carries a drop of her essence. Every musician who plays near the sea hears her hum guiding their hand. Benten no longer rules from afar. She lives among her creation, scattered in every note, every shimmer, every tender ache that stirs the human heart. And so the story ends not in sorrow, but in transformation. The goddess became the song, the mortal became the echo, and the world was left forever changed, softened by the touch of impossible love. For when divinity falls in love with humanity, neither truly fades. They simply learn to exist in harmony. The eternal tide and the fleeting breath meeting again and again in the space where music and memory meet. And in that meeting, the song of Benten continues, endless, tender, and alive.
The sea remembers. Even now, when the tides move silently beneath the moon, when the air hangs soft with salt and fog, it carries the echo of her song. Benten's melody is not merely music. It is a living pulse, a lesson woven into the rhythm of waves, a truth whispered into the hearts of all who listen. It teaches that love cannot always remain within reach, that beauty, once encountered, is a gift both tender and fleeting. Every shimmer of moonlight on water, every swell and retreat of the tide is a reminder of her presence, of the divine intimacy that touched a mortal soul and left its mark upon the world. Art, too, bears her imprint. It is born of longing, shaped by impermanence, and made eternal only through devotion. Every brushstroke on canvas, every note plucked from a string, every whispered verse in the quiet hours of night carries a trace of that divine desire, the ache to reach beyond oneself, to touch something larger, more luminous. Benten's song reminds us that creation itself is an act of surrender, a communion between human fragility and divine passion. To make art is to allow oneself to feel both the pleasure and the pain of existence, to transform longing into beauty, to listen for the voice of the eternal hidden within the fleeting. Within her myth lies the paradox of sensuality, the irresistible pull of that which cannot be possessed. It is a force that awakens the soul, teaching mortals to feel more deeply, to love more honestly, to recognize the fleeting perfection of a single heartbeat. Desire in its purest form is both joy and torment, a reminder that life's most exquisite experiences are often beyond control. Through her song, the world learns to honor both longing and restraint, to cherish the ephemeral as if it were eternal, and to understand that surrendering to beauty does not weaken the soul. It strengthens it, shapes it, and sets it free. Even now, those who approach the shore at dusk feel it. the subtle rise of something unnameable in the air, the shimmer of moonlight on restless water, the faint vibration of a melody that exists somewhere between breath and wave. It is the pulse of a goddess, the echo of a mortal heart, intertwined and inseparable. In those moments, the world seems to hold its breath. The sound of the sea, the whisper of wind through reeds, the gentle caress of spray on skin, all speak of a love that transcends time, that cannot be fully seen, yet can be felt in every fiber of the being.
Benten's song teaches that true intimacy, whether divine or human, is never possession. It is resonance. It is the courage to open oneself to beauty, to vulnerability, and to desire, knowing that in that opening, even fleeting, eternity may be glimpsed. Love is not ownership. It is the willingness to let another exist fully, even when their presence cannot remain. It is a melody that rises, peaks, and fades, leaving echoes that shape the soul forever. The myth does not end, for it is not bound by time. It flows like the tide into every heart willing to listen, and in that listening we find ourselves, fragile, yearning, alive, and forever touched by a love that is at once mortal and divine. In every note of music, in every sigh of the ocean, in every trembling light on water, her presence persists, shaping perception, imagination, and feeling. Every artist, every lover, every seeker of beauty carries a fragment of her song, whether they know it or not. Her song is not just a story, it is an inheritance. Every note, every whisper of the wind, every shimmer of moonlight over the waves carries her essence. It is a truth older than words, that beauty and longing are inseparable, that love transforms, and that in surrendering to the music of life, we touch the divine. Each encounter with beauty, each moment of vulnerability, each creation born from the heart is a continuation of her melody, and so we carry her song within us. It flows through our art, our hearts, and our moments of quiet wonder. We may never see her face, nor hold her hand, yet in every sigh of wind, in every shimmer of water, and every fleeting note that stirs the soul, she is there, reminding us of what it means to live, to love, and to feel the eternal pulse of beauty. The story of Benten and Haru is not only theirs, it is ours. In the hush after a melody ends, in the stillness of a calm sea, in the longing that rises in the chest unbidden, we hear it, the song of a goddess, the echo of a mortal heart, and the quiet, exquisite truth that binds them forever. Through this myth, we learn that every encounter with beauty leaves us changed. Every surrender to desire teaches us courage, and every note of music, human or divine, carries the weight of eternity.
Benten's song endures because it is not hers alone, nor his alone. It is the song of all who dare to feel, to create, and to love fully, even in the shadow of impossibility. In listening, we remember. In remembering, we awaken. And in awakening, we find that love, like art, like the sea itself, flows without end, carrying the promise of connection, the ache of longing, and the eternal resonance of a song that will never truly fade. Through her myth, we learn that divinity can love without restraint, that mortality can touch the eternal, and that the truest beauty is found not in possession, but in reverence, in resonance, in the willing surrender to the fleeting yet perfect moment of connection. Every wave, every note, every breath is an invitation to feel, to create, to remember, and to carry forward the song that begins in the heart and spreads to the edges of the world. Even when the sea appears calm, even when the night is silent, her song flows. It winds through reeds, hums in the wind, trembles in the air, and waits in every heart that dares to listen. That song is eternal. That song is ours. That song is the proof that love, beauty, and desire are never lost. They are transformed, like moonlight on the waves, into a melody that carries forward forever. And there is more still. In the quiet moments of dawn, when the first light glances off a wave, when a musician plucks a string and the note floats into the air, one can feel her presence, soft, elusive, alive. It is a reminder that the divine need not remain distant. It can reside in every fleeting act of creation, every tender encounter, every song that rises from the depths of the heart. The myth of Benten teaches patience and presence. It teaches that longing is sacred, that desire is a guide, and that beauty often demands both courage and surrender. Her story is a mirror reflecting the delicate balance of love and art, human and divine, fleeting and eternal. To hear her song is to know that every act of feeling, every note, every sigh, every glance is a thread in the tapestry of life, weaving mortality and divinity together into something luminous. And so, in the hush after a melody ends, in the soft sigh of waves against the shore, in the quiet ache of a heart stirred by beauty, we find her. Not as myth, not as distant goddess, but as an eternal presence that sings within us all. Benten's song is not just a story, it is the pulse of life itself, the delicate reminder that love transforms, that art endures, and that the divine is never truly absent when the heart is open. Through it all, we are left in awe. We listen, we feel, we carry the song forward, and in doing so, we honor her, we honor him, we honor the moment when mortal longing met divine resonance and created something unending.